Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Powerful Man Show. I am your host, Doug Holt, with my co-host, Tim, the Powerful Man Matthews. What's going on, brother?
Well, you just crushed the last episode. So it was quite relaxing for me. You just took it away, crushed it, which was awesome. So if you're tuning in right now, I would suggest you go back and listen to Dougie Fresh in Flow from the last episode. Some great advice.
Oh, thanks, man. I love fielding the questions from the guys. We always talk about in The Powerful Man, does it fill you up? In other words, do you feel more energized after you're doing something or more depleted? And coaching I've been coaching for over 20 years or mentoring for over 20 years. And not every time, but almost every time I walk away from either doing a podcast, if it's a coaching related topic, or helping somebody, I always have more energy than I went into it. So it's a heck yes for me.
Makes me realize, like, when you say 20 years, I'm thinking, how long have I been coaching? I'm like, oh my God, it's been like 14 years. You just don't realize, do you? They're just,
Dude,
when you do what you love.
If you count soccer coaching, it's almost been 30 for me. That's crazy. Just in coaching in some aspect of life and leading people and teaching them, it's been almost 30 years.
Yeah, I'd count the soccer coaching. Change it. So the topic I want to bring to the table today, Mr. Dougie Fresh, is what around men, and I'm going to say men and mental health, just because this was what one of the people on the team labeled it because of their experience in speaking to several men who had various different labels, let's call it, attached to them. Now, I want to pre-frame this with the fact that obviously, we are not doctors. We are not saying that, any mental illness does or does not exist, or that anyone does or does not have it. And we completely respect everyone's right to their own path and their own opinion on this. And I just want to share my opinion and my perspective and things that I have seen and witnessed as a result of working with the men. So I'm just going to roll into it, if that's cool with you.
Yeah. As long as the disclaimer is out there, we're
disclaimer is out there.
We're not doctors. This is not medical advice. We're not. This is not even our specialty by any means. Our
specialty. We don't even coach people. So yeah. Anyway, part of what we have seen in the movement over the past few years is an increase in men who come to us and have experienced or are experiencing some form of mental illness, right? And first of all, I love the fact that these men are even coming to us because, I come from a family where, 3 of my cousins had mental illness and they didn't make it out of it. They committed suicide. And I'm trying to think back, I don't even think the mental illness was visible for 2 of the 3. And, transparently, I also think the mental illness, it wasn't something that was inherited. It was something that was caused, in my opinion, more so by nurture than nature. Now, I get that certain, predispositions can predispose people, rather, to various illnesses. And also environment can play a big part in it, right? So anyway, where I'm going with this isn't necessarily all about mental illness. So I don't want to get hung up on that. The bigger thing that I want to really talk about are the labels that we give ourselves, right? Because, I can remember I've had various alpha resets where we have guys that show up and they say, I've got ADHD, I have anxiety, I'm also depressed, and I have suicidal tendencies, and I'm addicted to porn or drugs or cigarettes. And look, you look at this guy and he's sat on the sofa there, and honestly, he's a bit of a mess. You can see the anxiety in his face. His legs are crossed. His foot is just twitching up and down. Bum, 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 bum. And he's breathing. he's barely even breathing. He's taking these real shallow breaths that are coming from real high up in his chest, which, if you know anything about breath work, even that type of breathing creates anxiety. So I'm a firm believer in a couple of things in relation to this topic. One is labels. The labels that we give ourselves can become identities that we live into. Whatever that label may be, I have anxiety, I have this, I am that, I am the other. It doesn't matter whether it's a mental health label or whether it's a label around your personality. I am a millionaire. Whatever. The labels we give ourselves are very powerful in carving and creating an identity that we then do our best to live into. We will find evidence and we will find ways to live into the fact that I am a millionaire or I am anxious, I am depressed, right? So the other thing I firmly believe is what you think in the mind, you feel in the body. You just do. And Einstein once said that energy cannot be destroyed or created. It can only change form, right? And emotion is energy in motion. And this was some of the underpinnings for how we designed the Alpha Reset, right? And a big part of that, you see these guys come who are sat there and the foot's twitching and they're anxious and they're barely breathing on day 0, let's call it, right? And by the end of that process, there's a different man sat on that sofa. Completely different guy. This one guy I'm thinking of in particular sat back, arms relaxed, breathing from his stomach, smile on his face, both feet planted on the floor, at ease and at peace in his body instead of being in his head. Because his head is where all this comes from. That guy then went on to all of a sudden stop smoking. His addictions began to dry up. I'm not reporting that the Alpha Reset is some miracle cure for addiction. I'm just sharing this one guy's particular journey. His anxiety faded away, as did his depression. And part of that was because he started to see himself differently. He saw himself as a man that was more than the label of anxiety or anxious or ADHD or whatever. And he discovered tools that he could use to then shift his state essentially and put him in a place where he was focused. I mean, this guy had ADHD, no? And comes to the Alpha Reset, one thing we do, I don't want to give it away. It's so hard to get this point across without giving this one thing away, so I'm not gonna. As Doug stares very firmly down the camera at me, don't you dare give anything away. But the point I'm making is this one guy who has ADHD is in an environment where he has nothing to do except to be with himself. All distractions removed, just there with himself. And he was able to be there. To his surprise, at first, like I said, restless, scratching, looking around the room, tapping his foot, tapping the other foot, rubbing his hand, shifting in his seat. Everything. So I want to pass this over to you, Doug, as well, because the question I'm wondering right now as we think about the idea of labels, I'm even thinking about some of the calls I've had this week with some of the men who have said, I am anxious. What if you didn't choose to own that label so powerfully? What if instead there was another option available to you, right? Instead of it, I am anxious. Sure, you can experience some anxiety, right? We all as human beings have varying degrees of anxiety at various times in our lives or throughout the day, and it's a very healthy and normal reaction. It's completely healthy. It can become unhealthy when you start to blow out, I am anxious and look for the ways and have that label on you. It almost becomes a bit of a safety blanket too. Hence the Alpha Reset, reset what it means to be alpha. So anyway, I'm going to shut up rambling and pass it to you.
Bring you in
ramble on the topic. I just get so passionate about this stuff. I think it's partly because of my family, right? There we go. I'm back on it again. I think it's partly because of what I've witnessed with, people close to me. And I hate to see people in pain. I really don't believe there's a need for you to be in pain. I think you have a choice to get out of it, and you can. And witnessing those men on the Alpha Reset and the way that they show up and what is on the other side for those men, seeing guys who come there with labels like this and they actually let go of the labels and seeing how quick it can happen. It's frustrating, heartbreaking, upsetting to then hear of anyone having a label on them in that way.
Just making sure you're done. No, I agree. I mean, I think it's, when you see somebody that's in pain or it's hurting and you have the solution or a possible solution, let's just say that, and a remedy, it's hard not to get passionate about wanting to talk or share it with people, right? It's, a lot of times people that have a food allergy or something like that somebody's been able to, reverse chronic fatigue syndrome or what have you. They want to tell everybody else that's got chronic fatigue syndrome, hey, here's what I did. This is why we have so many guys do testimonials for the Alpha Reset, for the activation method. These are normal businessmen that normally don't want to be in front of camera, but it changed their life. So they're passionate. One thing I want to go back to, and I'll come back to the labels question you asked me, Tim, is the question of mental illness. And I think it's really important as you were talking about mental illness, because I didn't think we were going to go that route. I just Googled the definition, like, what is it? Like, what is mental illness? Because it's thrown around so much, like so many other terms in society. And so here's a definition that I pulled up, and it seems to be a similar definition on all the websites. So I think they're just copying each other. But it says mental illnesses are health conditions involving changes in emotion, thinking, or behavior, or a combination of these. Mental illnesses are associated with distress and or problems functioning in society, work, or family activities. Mental illnesses are common. Now, whenever something's common, you start to think, is this really an illness?
Thinking, fuck, I'm mentally ill. I've been mentally ill tons of times.
Can't everybody fall into this definition, which kills me. I hate this definition, quite honestly. And I understand that there's, we can go to schizophrenia, dementia, all kinds of mental illnesses that have more concrete definitions. But as a broad term, the definitions that I'm finding online anyways, as you were talking, are horrible, because we can all find ourselves in there. Just like I could say all the evidence of why I'm a bad guy versus a good guy, right? Or a good guy versus a bad guy. So you can find that. It's just so vague. But back to labels. It's often said, and I do believe this, that the two most powerful words in the English language or in any language is I am. And the reason it's so powerful is it's a declarative statement. I am, boom. Anything you put after that, you are labeling yourself. And your subconscious mind, your ego, will fight for that label. It'll fight to prove it right, to prove you right. So if you say, I am an amazing husband, right? And you believe it, you got to believe it too. You can't just sit there and look in the mirror and go, I am amazing. Like, it's almost like saying I am happy when you're not. It doesn't work, right? But if you believe it, then you show up that way. If you say, I have ADHD. Now, in a previous podcast, this gentleman said he was diagnosed with it, and we can have a debate about what, diagnosis and all kinds of things. I've talked to some specialists around this topic, but that's for another podcast. Most people I talk to, especially business owners, check almost all the boxes, entrepreneurs for ADHD. However, in the reality, we see them at the Alpha Reset, these labels come peeling off. Mm-hmm. And these labels come on for most of us guys through somebody else. And we may not realize it, but somebody else probably told us, hey, you're bipolar, because you have these mood swings, right? Maybe your wife told you that. Maybe your parents told you that when you were younger. You heard somebody else mention it about you, and you've taken on that label and you put it on like you put on a suit that you never will take off. You refuse to. You fight to not take that suit off. You fight to keep it on. And you'll start finding reasons why you're bipolar. Oh, I got angry at the kids. Oh, my wife, I just tired and worn out, and I'm just bummed that my marriage isn't working. I must be bipolar, right? We have a guy right now who's in the movement, and his wife is telling him he's bipolar, and he's believing it. And we've met him. We know him well. He is not bipolar, right? Again, I'm not a doctor, but I can tell you with a high degree of certainty he's not, because I've spent a lot of time with him. And bipolar disorder is associated with episodes, I'm reading this, of mood swings ranging from depressive lows to manic highs. Those are dramatic swings. This guy isn't that way. We all have swings of depression and happiness. That's human nature. If you're just a flat line, that's boring, right? You have no emotion. That's much worse. So coming back to the labels, really watch what labels you're putting upon yourselves, man. What are you telling yourself? Right? What are other people saying about you? And are you accepting it? Where do you get these from? So what I'm going to ask you guys to do is go ahead and pause this after this exercise. I'm going to encourage you to do it. Obviously, if you're driving, maybe bookmark this or what have you, depending on what you're listening this to or what podcast player or YouTube. Grab a piece of paper and write this: I am ... and then put a bullet point below it. And write the first thing that comes to your mind. And then once you write that down, put another dot below it and write the next thing that comes to your mind, and keep repeating until all you have is just one dot below the last sentence. And you could end up with multiple pages. I am an athlete. I am an ex-athlete. I am a dad. I am a father. I am a husband. I'm a great husband. I'm a shitty husband. I'm a man that takes action and is very decisive. It's a big difference on your outcome versus I'm a man who deliberates and sits on the fence. And maybe you're doing that with joining this program. I don't know. But where are you with your labels? I am. And again, it's the two most powerful words. When we talk about labels, and Tim talked about this, is we've seen legitimately hundreds of guys strip away these BS labels that they put on themselves. And they really didn't put them on themselves. Somebody else put it on them usually, and they've just fought to keep it on. And there's a lot of ways to get rid of these labels. Obviously, we think the Alpha Reset's the fastest and best way, but it depends on what your outcome is. First, identify what those labels are. Then you can start to strip them away.
Yeah. And look, when the guys strip the labels away and they get real with themselves, often the realization that they come to is I was using the label as an excuse.
Yep.
I was using the label as a way out because it was easier for me to label myself as bum, 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 bum than it was for me to realize what was going on for me and do the work so that I shifted my behavior. Right? I mean, at the same time, there's a whole industry out there, right, that makes up terms and labels and marketing to sell these labels, and people in certain positions that people trust that get paid for anyway. So, but I think it's worth noting as well, right? Because we do wear these labels that people tell us, and I just
I'm going to interrupt for a second, Tim, because I got a message from one of our advisors right before Costa Rica that was saying, basically, man, I'm getting on the phone with a lot of these guys, and they're using these labels of I'm manic or whatever it is, the labels that their wife is telling them as excuses not to take action. And not only to join the activation method, but any other program that might help them. We're biased. We think the activation method is the best. That's just the truth. However, we're also have always said, if you don't do the activation method, do something. And this is where I get charged up, because guys are using these as excuses for not taking action. And again, it's like you have this remedy for somebody. If you have the cure for cancer, so to speak, it's a horrible analogy as I'm saying it out loud, but I'm going to keep going with this. So I apologize, guys. But if you have the cure for cancer, and you see somebody with cancer, you want them to take it. You're like, hey, take this, do something. If you don't want to take the thing that I know is a cure, do something, right? Don't just be stagnant. So again, a horrible metaphor, but I think you guys get the analogy, or what I'm trying to drive home here is this is why we get so passionate when we're talking about these subjects.
Well, I'm glad you equaled out my passion in the beginning. I thought I was just going off on one.
No, it's awesome. I mean, that's why you're so good at what you do, Tim, is you care. You know, you really care about the men, all the coaches, everybody in the movement does. You know, at this point, the movement's growing in the back end, people behind the scenes. There's almost 30 of us now. And, you know, it's grown. This is an international movement of men, a brotherhood, if you will. And everybody's passionate about it. We spend most of our team meetings talking about wins guys are having. And we don't do that necessarily by design. It's just everybody's so excited about it. Even the advisors that talk to the guy in the first phone call are following that guy's journey for a year afterwards because they care. I think that's why people join our team, you know? So we're very blessed. So your passion, my friend, is one of your best qualities, even though I always give you a little bit of shit for it, but that's because you're my friend. So guys, in listening to this, who are you? What are your labels? Are you a powerful man? Is that the label you've given yourself? Or have you given yourself a label that your wife has put upon you or somebody else has put upon you? So the question is, what are the labels you're putting on when the words come out, I am, out of your mouth? I am tired. I am sick. I am thirsty, whatever. What are they? And the second question is, who's given those to you? Who's given you those labels? And third is, why have you chosen to keep them? Gentlemen, always in the moment of insight, take massive action, and we'll see you next time on The Powerful Man Show.